What's up, Compete Training Academy family? Welcome to the Compete Mentality Podcast. The mission of the Compete Mentality Podcast is to motivate, educate, and inspire others to compete. No matter what area of life you are in, we are all called to compete. Our definition of competing is doing what God is calling you to do, even when it's hard. This episode of the Compete Mentality Podcast is sponsored by the Lewis Jackson and Jordan Delks Basketball School. Be looking for details coming in April on our social media avenues. It is now my pleasure to introduce former IWU legend and CEO of Marlin Academy, my guy, Johnny Marlin. Johnny, thanks for hopping on the podcast today, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And Johnny, we just to kick us off, we ask this question a lot to kick off our podcast, just because Courtney and I, we're obviously trainers and we love holding people accountable on the court, off the court, in the area of nutrition. But Courtney and I, we love our food and we love trying new places. And you just, I know your favorite meal at IWU was chicken fingers, but
Absolutely.
I'm gonna hope you have a better answer than that. But we're big foodies, and I want to know your go-to restaurant and describe what you're ordering today.
So if it's for lunch, I would probably choose Chipotle, and my order is a little different. I'll get 2 plain tortillas, and I'll just get a bowl of meat, so chicken and steak. And I just think it's phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great.
So that's for lunch. There's a new pizza place in town that's called Noble Romans, and they have this deep dish. And so if it's dinner, I would probably choose that right now. I've just been in an absolute kick for their deep dish sausage.
Absolutely. I expected nothing less than for Marlin to answer with an answer like that. Nothing crazy, just good old-fashioned American meat and pizza. I love it. Marlin, I had the absolute pleasure of coaching you for 2 years and really witnessing your phenomenal career at Indiana Wesleyan. I just kind of want to talk shop IWU basketball. Obviously, us being a part of the IWU family. Give us your top 5 players in IWU history.
Oh gosh. So I'm going to kind of twist the question a little bit. I'll give you the what I would consider the best 5 to play with, or like the best starting line. So I have to take into account team chemistry and things like that. And I'm also going to only answer it from the time that I was there until now, because I don't know much about the past. I just didn't see those games, and so I just want to be fair.
That's fair.
I would, man, I hate to start off like this, but at the 1 guard, I would say myself.
That is with no debate.
At the 2 guard, I mean, I just loved how there was a level of trust between Bob and I, and so Bob would be my 2. I love how he defended, but as a passer, like, the dude could fill it up. So Bob's my 2. And then I don't think that I need to do any explanation. Kyle Mangus would be my 3. So, and what's crazy is that I've been up there several times. I don't think I've ever played with him. But I got a feeling he would be pretty easy to play with.
No doubt about it.
And then 4, this one really was a wrestle with me, but it would be Lane Mahern. I don't think that you can dispute his talent by any means, but I think Lane and I were so different on just how we approach things. But the thing that I love about Lane is that he had your back at all times.
Yes.
Like, if there was ever a moment to where the game got a little chippy, like, Lane was going to be the first person in that battle. And so, I mean, Lane would be there. And then
he's as loyal as they come.
He really is. And so, and I think Lane's a great passer. I just think that he spaces well. He does a lot of things. Even though he was a 3-time All-American, I just think there's things that he did that was a little under the radar.
Yeah.
And then, man, my 5 would be a Maxwell.
Yep.
And I'm leaning towards Evan
Okay.
only because I looked at his stats recently, and the dude was in the mid 40s both seasons from the 3-point line.
Right. Right.
And I just think from a spacing perspective, that'll be tough. So all that to say, my 1 would be Johnny, my 2 would be Bob, 3 Mangus, 4 Lane, and 5 would be Evan.
Man, that team would be hard to argue, and I would love to see that team go up against anybody right there. That's a phenomenal team.
That'd be
Johnny,
fun.
Johnny, you obviously played at IU,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a coaching vacancy down there right now. And I am curious, and obviously in the state of Indiana, basketball is a big deal. And I want to hear, like, it's just everywhere I go, I feel like people are talking about this, who IU is
Mm-hmm.
going to hire. And so, like, I'm really curious on who you think they will hire.
I think there's some. I mean, the names that I've heard the most, and honestly, I've not followed it that much, so that's probably an error on me. But the names that I've heard the most, I've seen a lot of things about Thad Matta. I've seen a lot of things about John Beeline, and I do think that they would be solid hires. I know that I'm biased. The thing that I think would be best for Indiana is if they went after Coach T. I really do. I just think that he has built a culture that is unparalleled in this college basketball world. Um,
Absolutely.
and I realize that the jump is from an NAIA school to a Division One. But if there's a challenge, like he's going to succeed at whatever he does.
Correct.
Um, but I don't think IU would do that. The thing that I have seen that has been the most exciting to me was there was an article written about bringing in John Beeline and having Coach T be the assistant, and then
Yeah.
in 5 years he would just take over as Beeline is getting up in years. So
Yeah. I saw that too. And I'm going to go with your, we're not biased at all in this at all, but I'm going to go with you on that and saying the Hoosiers should hire our guy, Coach T. He would be successful in literally anything he does for sure. So,
mm-hmm.
Johnny, as we've dove in already a little bit of your background, but just kind of give our audience the story of how you got to where you are today. Just give us your background, man.
So I played high school basketball at Center Grove, just a school on the south side of Indy. I actually went to IPFW, which is now just called Purdue Fort Wayne, but it's a small Division I school up in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I really felt like the Lord was calling me out of there. And so after my freshman year, I left. At the time, I really didn't know where I was going, but I received a phone call from Coach Crane down at IU, and I already had some existing friends on the team with Zeller and Holes and Austin Etherington, and so that was a really hard thing for me to turn down. And obviously, I did not turn that down. And so for the first year, I was a redshirt, and man, our team was crazy nice. We had Yogi at the 1, Jordy, Victor, Watford, Zeller. So like it was a lot of fun just to be a part of that team and just to watch how they went about their business on a day in and day out basis. I stayed another year, and I got minimal playing time, but it was weird that my playing time actually increased as the season went on. And however, at the end of the season, I just felt like the Lord was calling me out of there. And I was pretty confused at this point because IU was definitely a dream school of mine. It was a school that was 45 minutes away. And but when the Lord says like it's your time to go, I think that you have to listen. And so I did, and I transferred to Indiana Wesleyan, and it was the best 2 years of my life. So hands down.
That's awesome. That's cool, Johnny. And I want to dive into different parts of your story and your testimony that you just shared. But I specifically, you and I are both trainers. Johnny is the CEO of Marlin Academy, trains a lot of players on the south side of Indy and all over the state of Indiana. They come to train with him. And I've learned a lot from Johnny as a player, as well as in his role as a trainer. And he's I mean, incredible. So I want to dive in a little bit to different parts of, when you were recruited,
Mhm.
your time in college playing, even in training. But first, I want to start about your recruiting journey. You and I both have hoopers that are going to be listening to this that are going through the recruiting process and that can learn from your story. So please share with us your recruiting story and just kind of how it all developed.
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough to play not only on a good high school team, but on a really good AAU team. And so um, it was definitely helpful having players like Cody Zeller, Max Landis, Spencer Turner, Marshall Plumley,
Yep.
all play on this AAU team. And so when coaches would come in and they would come in absolute flocks to watch those guys, I was somewhat like the beneficiary of that, um, because I definitely do not pass any eye test. And so it was really important that I had those guys on those teams. And so my recruitment started off pretty slow, I would say, just because I think people were leery if I could compete from an athletic level, and then also just from a size level, being 5'10". And when you like, I don't look like I'm physically strong, so like there was just something that I think coaches really wanted to make sure that they were doing their due diligence with me. And so my first offer came late as a junior from Morehead State. And once one, kind of rolled in, then I felt like a lot of others kind of just steamrolled from there. And so I believe that I ended up getting 11 Division I offers, and I honestly chose IPFW because it was the closest one for me. So there was a lot of ones that were on the East Coast that were down in Florida. But I mean, one thing that was really important to me was that family could watch. And so I committed under Dane Fife.
Yep.
Dane Fife left that same summer.
Yep.
And that was kind of I mean, I definitely wanted to play for Dane. I just know that he was a tough guy. And so I think that our personalities and just how we compete would have been meshed well together. But I also knew that he was going to be a really hard coach. I know that he played for Bob Knight. And so like, if you're there with Knight, then I mean, I'm sure at times that, we would bump heads and things. So, yeah, so that's kind of my high school story. It was tough because although I was in the same team of these guys, but they were getting phone calls from everywhere in the country, and literally it was not just Cody and Marshall, but it was everyone on the team. And so to see some of your teammates and your close friends get the offers that you wanted, it was definitely a humbling thing for me.
Sure. Now that's a fantastic story, and I love how you said earlier in this conversation of how uh, you said when the Spirit or the Lord says move,
Mhm.
you got to move, and that's the thing I know about you and I love about you is that you live a life led by the Holy Spirit, and uh, I want to dive into your transfer process. Just kind of like you
Mhm.
said, God was calling you out of different places, and I can relate to that. I played at two different schools and still had a year of school left, and finished it as a student manager under Coach Painter at Purdue, and so I can relate with that and
Yeah.
knowing that feeling of when God is calling you out of a situation. So, really tell us about your transfer process. Um, just because like I think a lot of times I know from my perspective, I hear, transfers get a knock, like what is, what's wrong with them? Are these guys unhappy?
Right.
Really, I can look back and be so thankful for my journey in each stop of the way. So I'd love to hear from your perspective, just to tell us about your transfer process and maybe what you learned or what you're thankful for through that.
Absolutely. So IPFW, honestly, was a great, um, I think, place for me to thrive from a basketball standpoint. I was able to come in. I started as a freshman. I played like 30 minutes a game, which was honestly probably more than what I was expecting. Um, but I knew that basketball would only take me so far, and I wanted to be challenged off the court as much as I would be on the court. And so, honestly, from a spiritual aspect, um, I felt like there wasn't much accountability that I was having. I was um, I would say probably the only believer on the team, and so that was really hard for me. And so I just felt like this was an awesome freshman year to where I really had to have my roots founded in Christ, just because there's a lot of things off the court that goes on. And so, but at the end of the day, after that freshman year, I think 4 years of that would have been extremely grueling and taxing, just from like the spiritual side of things. And so um, I decided to transfer. I ended up at IU. This was fairly comfortable for me because a lot of my high school buddies were now down at IU. They had established themselves in the crew ministries, and so I was able to hop in on that. And as I shared earlier, I mean, this was literally a dream destination for me to play for the Hoosiers. And I mean, it was clear as day that like the Lord was calling me out of there. And I think it helped that at the time that I left, a lot of my buddies on the team were also either graduating or they themselves were transferring. So Austin Etherington was he transferred to Butler. Taylor Ware, he graduated. Jeff Howard, he graduated. And so there was just a lot of things that kind of fit, which made it easier. But at the same time, I knew that the Lord was calling me out. And so at this time, this was I mean, just as you said, it's a major pride check to be like, man, this kid, can he not just fit, like, can he not fit in? Is he not working hard? Are the coaches running him off? And honestly, I don't think either of those situations were true, but that's what you would hear.
Sure.
And so, but if the Lord is calling you to do something, it's for a greater purpose. And so what I experienced at Indiana Wesleyan was not only an extremely high level of basketball, but it was a chance where your spiritual life was more important than anything else. And so I will never forget, we were on our missions trip the very first year before I ever played a basketball game. And Jack Clark, this is Coach Clark's father, comes up to me and he's like, I think for these next 2 years, you're going to be trained in how to make disciples for the rest of your life. And at this point in time, I didn't even know who Jack Clark was. Like, this was our first interaction. And for him to come up and say that to me, it kind of just made me take a step back. But that's something that I always remember. And I really think he was spot on, that I was learning how to make disciples for the rest of my life by being inside that program.
No doubt about it. And man, I'm just getting chills just listening to your story and everything you learned from each stop. And there's no doubt about it. I love how Jack said that to you. And I think that's just what's so special about the Indiana Wesleyan cultures. They really are second to none at discipling players.
Yeah.
And, it's the Great Commission and telling them to go and disciple others. And it's cool to see that multiplication. Johnny, you, like I mentioned earlier, you're one of the very best in training players, developing players. It was so cool to see you and your routine as a player, and how much time you put into your craft and into player development specifically. I'm curious, like, if you could give us your player development philosophy in terms of training, like, what would that be?
Oh gosh. I mean, I think it's so dependent upon each player. And it's hard because the higher level you get, the more specific that you have to be. And honestly, if let's say that you're like a college player, well, your role might be to be a 3-and-D type of guy. Yeah. And so now we're really honing in, like, all right, are you able to make shots, just catch and shoot? And now are you able to make shots off the move? And then are you able to put on the floor for one dribble? And so you just slowly have to build what they're already good at should make them more effective. Right. As opposed to being like, all right, you're a 3-and-D guy, but let's work on breaking someone down, in a 1-4 low situation. Well, that's probably not the situation that you're going to be put in. So from a college pro standpoint, that's probably how we, look at things. But I think as a kid, like it's so important that you know how to handle the basketball and that you know how to shoot. And so from a kid, you're just honestly, it sounds weird, but I think showing them and just introducing them to a bunch of different things is so critical. And as trainers, we don't see them on a day-to-day basis. We might, but more than likely we're seeing them once or twice a week. And so
Right.
we're more than anything, we're trying to create a love and a passion for these kids, because like at the end of the day, it starts with a ball, a boy, and a dream. And like he's got to go back and he's got to want it himself. And so if
Yep.
we're able to show them these things, like um, I still think it falls back, like, man, as much as I want to put in the work for them, like they're the ones who have to go out and get it.
No doubt. No doubt. Yeah, no, that's a great philosophy. And I agree, man. Like there's no cookie cutter philosophy for
Yeah.
each player. And each, it's just like, I mean, and you and I are young parents. You got two kids, I got two kids, and, each kid's different already in their own way. I have
Hmm.
a 4 and a 1-year-old, and they're extremely different. And just that's, I mean, just like players, each player's different and is
Hmm.
going to respond to different coaching and need something different. So yeah, I
For
love
sure.
that, man. Johnny, you lead young men and women on a daily basis. You're a great leader. One of the best leaders I've seen on the court, especially at Indiana Wesleyan for the 2 years. I remember you at different times in the locker room, really, having to call guys out and speak
Yeah.
the truth in love. I remember you leading by example. And I want to talk about leadership specifically here. What do you think is the most important quality for a leader to have?
I'm not a leadership expert, but I mean, I think that you would have to be yourself. Like it can't be someone that you're not. Um, I'm not a rah rah type of guy, and I'm not someone who just enjoys talking. Um, so as you like, I think for me it was I was gonna have to lead by example. Now that's not to say that I have to shy away from moments where I have to speak up or whatever. But I think because that wasn't my personality, those times that I did speak up, it may have carried more weight. Um, but honestly, so I would say just it has to be who you are. It can't be someone else. But I think the most important thing about leadership would probably be like you from what we're trying to do, I guess, is man, you got to make sure that your walk with Jesus is right. Like if you're hearing from the Lord, that just changes everything. And so um, I think if you want to be an effective leader, an effective person at making disciples, then the most important thing is like you really need to make sure that your walk with Jesus is going in that right direction.
I love that answer. I'm reading John 15 the past couple of days. If you abide in the vine, you will bear much fruit.
Hmm.
And, there's so much truth to that, Johnny, and that's the only way to live. I just want to share. This is kind of off the script here. A story about Johnny and his leadership. I remember being on the father-son trip to West Virginia. We went to the New River kayaking. Uh, it was one of the best trips of my life with my dad, every player and their dad. And I remember one morning going into devotions where we were on this kind of uh, deck that was on the side of a mountain, and you could see just God's majesty on just early in the morning, and we're all out there just talking about what Jesus is doing in our lives and going through devotions. And Johnny, he was leading the devotion, and I remember him talking about digging ditches and expectation. That the Lord would fill those ditches with water. Just the story in Second Kings, in the story of Elisha, and I'll never forget that moment and the impact that moment had on my life. And I'll never forget that story. So, Johnny, I just wanted to thank you right here on the podcast for your words that day. That is truly, honestly, I'm a I'm a youth minister now, and I give a lot of lessons, and I'm sure like my kids like won't remember a single lesson that I ever give. So like, I just wanted to let you know that's a lesson and a devotion and that has been seared into my mind, and that I lean on at times when I need to step out in faith. So that was a very powerful moment for me. Johnny, just curious, like, as is so evident in this podcast, you're a man that walks with the Lord and live a life led by the Spirit. What is the Lord teaching you right now in this moment in time?
Well, I think when you have two young kids, I mean, we just had one less than a month ago. So one, just how important your discipleship role inside the family is. Just how much time you spend with your family, and like, so being intentional with them. And honestly, that's something that I can do a much better job of, just as far as serving my wife, knowing what she is doing on a day in, day out basis. So that's one area that I know that I need to grow in. I think one thing that I've just thoroughly enjoyed here in this past year is really just taking passages and just understanding them at a deeper level. And for me, I'm starting to see, and I'm just getting the glimpse of it. And I don't think that I'll ever be able to comprehend, but just the story of the Bible and how it all fits together. And like, everything was planned, and it was on purpose, and there's no mistakes. And like, when you start to see these stories and how they're intertwined, it just brings you to a place of worship, like to see the complexity of our God. And so that's one thing that I'm just being, I mean, it's been a year or so that I've just really enjoyed taking stories deeper. So yeah, so those two things, just knowing how critical your family unit is, and how the evil one wants to attack families, and you always have to be on guard for that. And then the second one is just seeing just the beauty in Scripture and how it all ties together.
Man, absolutely, Johnny. And again, you're giving me chills as you talk there. A couple things as we close here that I want to take from that, just kind of off the script. And I'm curious, I want to learn from you, man. Like, as a trainer, man, we we don't have a set 9 to 5, but we're working, feels like sometimes 20 hours a day, right? So I'm curious, man, like, what are some like maybe disciplines or habits you have lined in place to be a good husband and to be a good father?
Well, as I mentioned, this is an area that I'm working on, so do not take any lessons from me. I think one discipline that is becoming easier to do is just taking walks, just for us to get out of the house. And it's a great time for us just to have conversation. And so I'm so thankful that the weather's finally warming up, because we're able to do that now. But I've been on a team my whole life, and honestly, so has my wife. She played multiple sports in high school, and so just the fact that like we're able to come together on certain things, and like, hey, if she really wants to do this activity with her friends, well, that's going to be important to me. And she's been just the absolute best in allowing me to be with my friends, or whether that's me wanting to play basketball or do anything, to where it doesn't feel like we're just here at the house all day or something like that. So yeah, I have a long way to go, and I'm sure my wife would say the same thing, but it's something that I think is just extremely valuable.
No, I think that's a great point, though, and just truly dying to self, and
Yeah.
you wanting what's best for your spouse, and her wanting what's best for you at the same time. And
She does a much better job at that than I do.
I love it. And then just as we close, I want to pull another thing out from what Johnny just answered in the previous question of just how everything in the Bible all fits together. And that I want to encourage you right now, if you're listening to this podcast, that God has you exactly where you are in this moment in time for a reason. And he has plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans for hope and a future. And I just pray today that all of you that were listening to this podcast were able to pull just so many good things like I was able to from Johnny's testimony and just the way he's lived his life and his basketball career. So Compete Training Academy family, thank you for joining us today. Johnny, thank you for lending us your time and spending some time talking about hoops and basketball with me on the Compete Mentality podcast. Compete Training Academy family, always remember that competing is doing what God is calling you to do, even when it's hard.